So this is going to be a general warding guide for 7.24. If you want to maximize your vision, even if you're not the one placing it down, you can take advantage of the vision that either your allies or your opponents are there. Pretty much help your supports even to tell them where observer wards probably are. So one of the big ones early on is that if you are playing in the off lane, you'll put down an observer ward to block this small camp. And also when you place it further down, it gives you vision behind the tower. This can lead to a courier snipe, which is very valuable. And if you end up killing the courier before it comes in, or even afterwards, they can't keep flying out regen to themselves. So it pretty much opens up your lane a little bit more. So this means that if you're playing as a support in the safe lane, you really don't want this to happen. You don't want this ward to go into place. This is by far one of the strongest wards early on, if it doesn't get dewarded. So if it does get dewarded, it's not so good. And if we place down a sentry ward, let's say somewhere like here, which is a very common spot that people throw down a sentry, as you see, it doesn't fully clip that entire box. So why don't we actually decide to place down an observer ward over here at this point? So if we cut this tree, why don't we place our observer ward here? Well, the reason why you don't want to place an observer ward here is because the outpost can see it, and it also gives true sight at this point, so they don't even need to get a sentry to remove it. So over here on Dire, this vision of this ward at the corner of the box is quite similar. It goes behind the tower, but you don't really want to place one over here because it's very easy for the outpost also to see this. The same thing works on both Radiant and Dire for pretty much most of the wards in the game. Now, also early on, you will end up seeing wards being placed at the very start of the game that will either go for mid lane or they will either go to the off lane, as I was talking there. Now the mid lane will place somewhere like this, or else over here, or at this point. Both of these all do roughly around the same, and it's up to the mid players really to place down and control the vision at that point. Now this also means that if you have a sentry on hand and you do end up rotating to mid lane, it's often a good idea to throw down a sentry here when the creep wave is pushing in. This way the enemy will have a harder time to contest this sentry, and you pretty much can kill their vision if you did a rotation to mid lane, or even the mid player if they really need to get rid of vision. This is often a thing that people do, is they put a sentry in the river. Now when it comes to alternative wards you might want to do in mid, there is on this cliff, the big advantage of taking this ward on the cliff is that now you can see into this small camp here, either that you can stack it or just straight up farm it as a mid laner while you're moving in between the lane and the neutral camps. So over here on the Dire side, you would alternatively want to place it up over here, and this is a pretty good spot too. Now on the Radiant side, there's kind of another ward that is quite similar to the one on the cliff, which actually goes over here. So as you see, this moves in, you can see the neutral camp, and this gives you just enough vision over here to see the neutrals to start attacking them, while also giving vision into the river and slightly across over here. So as we can see, this ward goes over to this region, which is a little bit better. And sometimes it's up to like your personal preference on how the player plays on mid lane, whereas on Dire side it's very hard to get a vision that goes across the river and also hits into the neutral camp. As you see this observer ward, it kind of does around the same, but it's not as good just because it doesn't, it's not like, it's a little bit worse. As you see, it's like a little bit better on Radiant. But either way, these are two observer wards that are sometimes done on mid, and you do need to be aware of these if you are trying to do a rotation. Now, if you're trying to play defensive and you're trying to like deal with rotations for your mid laner, often these wards on the cliff are very good too, especially this one. If you're playing on Radiant side and you place one over here, this can protect your mid laner. They can see a pudge running through this area. And now coming up to 5 minutes, you'll see something dramatically change. Day and night time changes, and watch how the fog of war, everything closes in tighter and your vision becomes harder. So these observer wards become more critical once you have 5 minutes into place. Also around 5 minutes and 30 seconds, you have observer wards fading out. Observer wards last for 6 seconds, so it means that a lot of them are going to be dying around this point in the laning stage. Now you also have stuff like ganks like Spirit Breaker, which means that you're going to have to ward a little bit different, so you need wards in the river, somewhere like this, and even this ward across here is pretty good to place an observer ward there if you are trying to see Spirit Breaker before he starts charging on your mid laner that might be playing here on Radiant side. Now, the other thing comes with observer wards in stock, the other thing that players do. So let's say your safe lane went really well as a line, as position 5. You might start rotating to top. One of the common things that players do to try and put on more aggression in lane is to not only buy sentries to take away vision from the enemy, they do something like this, but they will also put down an observer ward, one here and another one over here. This way, you'll see that these two observer wards are so spread out that if the enemy comes along and they try to put down a sentry, not only has this sentry missed this observer ward and this one, even if they place a sentry correctly, they're only going to get 1 out of 2 of the wards. So they're going to have to commit 2 sentries to kill 2 wards, observers. So ideally, what you want to do if you're position 5 and your lane is being pressured really heavily, what you want to be doing is putting down multiple sentries. You often want to buy either 2 or 3 sentries to prevent this type of vision going in super aggressive, like this observer ward and this one, and you might even have another one over here. So 1 ward sentry goes here, then you would place 1 sentry over here. The idea is that they don't that you can pretty much cover as much area as possible, and you want to get this one over here. What's important is that these observers are actually hitting each other. Sometimes people like to place an observer ward here, which sometimes doesn't catch all of the sentries in place that I have right now. So if I place this sentry a little bit further, like over here, you would start to see that there's kind of a gap in the middle that doesn't always get caught. So don't place this sentry too far over to the left hand side, and same ends up being pretty much on the radiant side as well. Now when it comes to kind of after the laning stage, let's say that you're after taking this tower and you killed it and you're on radiant side and you start to want to push in further. Typically what you want to allow your offlaner to do is to just keep farming. Sometimes people just put down vision and keep trying to control this place and put a sentry with it. You generally want to be careful around this area because these wards can get dewarded. So if I go create hero techies enemy and I spawn techies down, techies has control of this outpost, so he cannot kill a ward that he doesn't have true sight of. As you can see, when I do an attack onto this, he cannot attack it, but if I put it over here, he can attack it. So this means that anywhere where techies can kill an observer ward, that means that this is where he has vision of. So here are 3 observer ward spots. As you see, this one over here, he cannot attack this one. This one he cannot attack either, yet this one he can. So the vision stops somewhere around here, and generally there's kind of like an oval shape, which I will pretty much edit into the video and show you kind of like what these spots are like. So, and similarly over here at this side, we'll have a look here what techies does when he wants to attack these. So he can obviously attack this guy, which is pretty close to the outpost. Or can he? He can, yes, no problem. But can he attack this guy? No, he can't. So you want to place it over at the edge of the stairs, away from the outpost a little bit further. So there's a lot of different observer wards you can place into the enemy jungle. You generally want to put vision where the enemy is not going to deward it. Often this spot on the dire side is one that they don't kill very often. They don't expect a ward that deep. And similarly on radiant side, if we have a look down here, we can place an observer ward in a nice little spot over here, which is quite similar but different. If we put an observer ward at this spot, people don't always expect it. It gives quite similar vision to this ward up here, and if the enemy puts down a sentry even at this location, it doesn't always catch it. So in the mid to late game, this becomes a little bit more important, that when you're trying to deward both of these observers at the same time, that you want to put down a sentry somewhere here, so not only does it catch the one on the cliff, but it's also catching this one over here. This is for high value to deward with a sentry, and if you have some sort of spell that can get vision on the high ground, or a courier, just put the courier up on top of the cliff. If I had a flying courier in this demo mode, I could do that. So some heroes like Disruptor have a spell that can see in the high ground, or Ancient Apparition, various like different advantages of some support heroes. Whereas an observer ward spot like here, if the enemy places one up here, it's really easy to like deward this. And sometimes people put observer wards over here at this location, so they'll put an observer ward here. Even though it doesn't get vision of any camps, it's not getting caught by the outpost. But a lot of time if people put down a sentry here, or sometimes they put down sentries here, it doesn't always get caught. So these types of observer wards that don't give as crazy good vision, it's just important that they're not getting dewarded more than anything. Now the other thing you can do when you want to go and play aggressive, which you see being done occasionally, is blocking camps. And blocking camps are very questionable of whether it's a good idea or not a good idea to do it, because it costs a lot of gold to buy sentries, and even your observer wards might get dewarded too. Generally, it's only a good idea against heroes like Anti-Mage or Spectre that you know that you can punish them early on if they can't farm. This ends up being up where you end up forcing them to kind of farm this area of the map. So if you're playing on Radiant side, you're going aggressive onto the Dire. They will only have these 3 camps here, which is not necessarily the most preferable. But one mistake that I see people doing with blocking camps is that they'll place one sentry here and another here. And as you see, these are really close together. If the enemy comes in, they place one sentry down, they can easily kill both of these sentries. Ideally, what you want to do with blocking camps would be to place one deeper down like this, and then the other one further up like this. As you see, they're much further apart now, and when I place down a sentry, it's very hard to get the perfect spot to get both of them. And this is not even like a perfect example here. Maybe you want to place this sentry down a little bit further, but making it that little bit harder for the enemy to catch out these observer and sentries, and really just placing them as far apart as you possibly can, is just way more important than just blocking any camps randomly. That's just maximizing it. So now when it comes to Roshan, there's different wards. You obviously have the one on your cliff over here, and you have one on the cliff over here. Now these 2 wards are obviously pretty good, except that if you're playing aggressive and you place down an observer here, you really don't want to die for placing an observer ward. If you get the observer ward down early before you go into Roshan, that's really nice, but don't go in suicide for Roshan because your death timers tend to be quite long. One of the other really good ones is to place an aggressive ward down at this position, because now as you can see, we can see this stairs and we can also see the other stairs. Often though, players do kind of stick around this area. If there's a snapfire, she will ulti from this location up here. So these are kind of things that players end up doing. The other idea that you can do with observer wards is to place wards in the river. Now as you can see, you can place an observer ward just right outside Roche Pit, but if we move it out a little bit further, we get a little bit of wrapping around vision. So obviously if you're placing down an observer ward, don't place it at this spot right in front of the pit. You want to place it a little bit further. Either way, if someone's going to place down a sentry, it's going to catch both of these observer ward spots in this area, but generally this one is a slightly little bit better because it gives that wrapping around vision. Now the other option for an observer ward early on, or this usually like better for the later Roshans. So if you place an observer ward down here, so if there's a Roshan around 20 minutes or so, the problem is that players will often have their own observer wards and sentries on cliffs like this, or else on the other cliff at the other side of the river. These sentries will very easily pick this off, but these ward spots like this are very uncommon later on in the game. So when it comes to the second Roshan, this ward is really valuable. It gets vision into Roshan and over here, and it very rarely gets dewarded a lot of the time. The other one, which is particular to hero picks around Roshan Pit. So a hero like Storm Spirit or Bat Rider can pretty much catch, like they can jump over the cliff of the Roshan Pit. So you can place an observer ward down on the cliff. Now you can place one over here, which as you see gives really nice wrapping around vision. Sometimes supports like the camp over here, as I was saying, like Snapfire sometimes goes up on the cliff at this area, but down here is also really nice for a Snapfire or CM ult or something along the lines of that. Now you can make this ward a little bit better by moving this observer ward over onto the cliff at this point. As you see, this reaches down much further and gives much better vision behind the Roshan Pit if there is supports or someone sneaking around this area. Now, one of the heroes that a lot of people hate playing against is a hero called Monkey King. Create hero Monkey, enemy, and we spawn him in, right? So this guy can jump up on trees, and often the guy wants to jump from vision where you can't see him. So he will come along at this area, and let's say he jumps over to here. You can see him jump up, but you can't actually see him in this tree. If you have an observer ward over here on this cliff, you can actually see Monkey King in the tree over here at this spot. See, he comes into vision now. And similarly on the other side, just these trees are on this side of the Roshan Pit, you can catch him with this observer ward. So on the other side, you can also catch Monkey with this observer. So as you can see, this one catches this location, and this is often the reason why Monkey is easily caught out by vision around Roshan. If you have these cliff wards, as I was saying, are very good at the top of the double stairs. So when it comes to late game, things get a little bit different. Let's say you're losing right now and you're in your base and you can barely get out of it. Often what you want to just do is place down sentries. Make sure that the enemy doesn't get really good vision around everywhere, even just getting vision in these areas. You have the obvious thing where you put down sentries when your, like say your tier 3 dies, in case the enemy comes with a shadow blade or some invisibility and walks up the cliff, or up the stairs, sorry, and anything like that. And just generally buying sentries is important when you're behind, and especially if you're a core that can easily afford them, it's often a good idea just to try and remove any sort of vision that the enemy can get. This opens up your ability to move out and potentially farm camps. Now similarly, if you're winning, let's say I'm on the dire side now, I want to make sure that the enemy does not get vision on this cliff. So you can make sure that they don't get vision here. You put down your sentries and you keep buying sentries even when you're ahead. Now there's two extra things I want to just cover before this ends, which is first off this cliff. So let's say you're standing here and you want to ward on the cliff. Automatically the patching will make you walk around. Similarly, if you're down here and you click on the cliff, it will sometimes make you pass around the other direction. You don't need to do this in either way. The best way of doing this is to walk in here near the cliff, and you can click on this edge of the top of this cliff here. So as you see the green indicator between my cursor and my hero, it disappears once I go out of the cast range. So you need to just place it on this cliff up here at this edge of it. So if you click too far over here, it won't actually reach it. Similarly, you can do it over here at this point, which you might sometimes see people doing, but this is actually a really bad way of doing it, because often players will be standing up here, or they might have an observer ward and they will see you placing this one. So placing it in here is a little bit better, and you can similarly do this with a sentry and get vision up here to kill an enemy observer ward without having to commit the position up the double stairs, which have a massive advantage with the fog of war. So the other thing comes with the power runes and vision for them. If you have a hero like Queen of Pain or Puck in a match, it ends up being quite important that they can run around and pick up the runes and go and keep playing active. And these runes like a DD can be massive to turning into a kill or a haste rune. So you want to make sure that you're contesting this vision on the cliffs if the quap is on the enemy team, or if the quap is on your team. You always want to make sure that the quap has vision of at least one of the power rune locations. So if you found this video helpful, you want to see more videos like this, make sure you subscribe. And I'm also streaming over on Twitch, so if you want to see me play some games, you can go follow me over there.